Welcome to The Performance Show, a videocast interviewing athletes, coaches and sports scientists from around the globe. Please welcome your host, Lachlan Puyol from Puyol Athletic Development and Performance.
Welcome to episode 21 of The Performance Show. Dave Bailey from Australia, from Sydney, now based in Parkland, Florida, joins us. So David is a tennis coach, specializes in what he founded as the Bailey method. So Dave, thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's great. Thank you so much. Great to speak to a fellow Aussie.
Yeah, in the States.
Accent. Don't get it too much over here in Florida. So.
No. And neither here as well. So just briefly, what is the Bailey method? How did you sort of find that?
Well, it's a little bit different. So I think a lot of people think footwork, is, which it is, moving in and out of ladders and weaving out of cones and, skipping. And that, what my method really is about is about actually doing the footwork on the court, hitting tennis balls. So it's very, very specific. It has a very set language. I take them through, a whole bunch of, attacking, rally, defensive footwork. But they come onto the court and they really, really focus just on their footwork, on their split steps, their crossovers. So the focus is really, really on that. So it's different. I'm pretty much the only person that actually really does that full time, where people will fly in and just work on their footwork. So that's pretty much the method. Yeah.
And you talk a lot about in your videos the 5 R's and how that's important, having that from young kids all the way up to professional, really. So what are the 5 R's and how can coaches around the world use that?
Well, the 5 R's is just a really simple way to look at footwork, and it's kind of breaking it down into 5 sections. And I think when you're looking at someone's footwork, you want to see which R is either the weakest, and what you really want is all those 5 R's to be as good as one another. So the first R is just getting ready. And that's more like how you get up on your toes, how you find your base, how you split your step. I have these reaction split steps. I have anticipationary split steps. So that's the first thing you do is get ready. The next thing is you read the approaching ball. So I have a name for all the different approaching balls that come. And then when you read that ball, obviously you're going to move to different parts of the court depending on whether it's a floating ball, it's a fast ball, it's a wide ball. So you read and then you react to that ball with what I call out steps. So they're the steps that you take out to the ball, and then you set your feet up into what I call a hitting stance. And I have more hitting stances than most coaches have. Like I have a running stance, I have a back foot stance. So I've named the stance a little bit more than the traditional amount of stances. So that's the third one. You react, and then you respond, which is probably my best known thing, which is what I call a contact move. And that's going to kind of show you some contact moves today. And that's a move that you make when you make contact with the ball. And every contact ball has a balance move, be it a knee up or a kick back or a knee drop. And then the last start is you recover. So pretty much you get ready, you read, react out to the ball, you respond with these moves, and then you recover. And I call that completing the circle, and you do that on every ball. So when I'm working with my clients on the court, I'm looking at those 5 R's. And sometimes even sort of saying, right, you need to really work on your base and your recovery, or, whatever move, relates to that approaching ball. So that's pretty much the concept. I think it's really important what I do. I'm a really big fan of shadow tennis. And I think, teaching the shadow tennis to them first is really, really important. And then having a name, when you do the shadow tennis, you need those 5 R's when you're going through it slowly. You need a word for, all the steps out to the ball. You need a word for the stance. You need a word for the kick. You need a word for the recovery. So I find the 5 R's are really important for teaching shadow tennis. And I'm a big believer in shadow tennis because you really got to slow it down sometimes. And then sometimes when they're doing the shadow, they can do the shadow, and then you can feed the ball in and they can feel, was that the same? When I shadowed it compared to with the ball. Yeah. So that's pretty much the concept of the 5 R's. But I find it really breaks it down, and it kind of, when you're watching any sort of, footwork on tennis, you can look at those 5 R's and kind of break it down. And I think that's, the smartest way to look at footwork on the court when they get balls.
And when we go into contact moves a little bit later, and that relates really to our third R, which is respond. How do you respond to the ball? And we have that contact move. What are those 6 sort of fundamental movements that you can kind of relate those contact moves into?
Yes. So I think there's there's 6 athletic skills that come into that contact move bracket. And so the first one is pivoting. So either keeping 1 foot or 2 feet on the ground. Sometimes you can step across into what we call a closed pivot, but that's one foot or 2 feet pivot on the ground. So that's the first one. The next one is spinning the hips, where you come off the ground in an elevated way and you spin the hips. There's transferring, where you transfer from 1 foot to another foot in an elevated manner. That's usually forward, but I call it like a transfer move. Then you have shifting, where you kind of shift to the side. So your hips shift to the side. Hit more of a moving stance, so I call that like a mogul, as you can imagine moguling on the. Then there's a lunging motion, which is kind of what you do when you hit on the dead run, as if you were kind of, jumping across a puddle. It's sort of like you got this, what I call a power move, where you're hitting this shot on the run, but you're really lunging out to the ball. And the last one is hopping, where you sort of hop, and you can do a front foot hop, you can do a lateral hop, you can do a back foot hop. So they're the 6 athletic skills that are really important in tennis.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it really simple to understand. But, some athletic skills are more complex than others. Some are more advanced. So, when you're working with a beginner or an older adult, you're going to keep it, simpler. And even, you're not going to like all the moves. Sometimes you've got to choreograph what move works for, the player. Sometimes, you're telling them more. Sometimes you're not even telling them what they have to do. Sometimes you're seeing what they're doing naturally and you're telling them what they're doing. So, but those 6 athletic skills I think are really, really important as a fundamental base, because those 6 athletic skills can become returners, to become approach shots, they can become volleys. So these fundamentals can be taken across to all aspects of the game.
Yeah. So why don't we get into those contact moves? I know you're going to share your screen.
Yeah. So I'll just go through. I think we'll start off with the attacking footwork. Hopefully, I think this is muted. So attacking footworks. So just even backtracking a little bit, through my research, and I wanted to do a frequency study of how often these contact moves are used. And my research showed there was like 140 something, different contact moves. If you look at blends and improvised moves and volleys and, approach shots and returns. But these fundamental 12, these golden 12 that I'm going to show you today, are the basis that you should learn first. And attacking footwork is more where you're attacking the ball with your hips or you're attacking the ball with your feet. So you're hitting them inside. So, we'll be able to see some of the athletic skills on that as well. So I'm just going to take you through that. And, whenever I work with someone, say someone flies in, I always like them to learn the look first. So, I've got this encyclopedia of all these pro players doing all these moves. Now, the pro players I'm going to show you today, one was an Australian actually, Jamila Gaidazova, who got to 25 in the world. And the other one's Claudine Shaw. She got to 27 in the world. So they're both very good players. So they were 2 players that I worked with. So I filmed them so I could control it a little bit better than, working with the pro players. But obviously, once you learn the look, you'll never look at footwork the same way again, because you've got what I call that biased eye. You've got that eye where you start to see these moves happening on the court. So the first one is what I call the front foot hop. And it's pretty obvious that you just want to watch how she just hops on this front foot. So obviously I like to use language that makes sense. And we're going to see it from in front. Usually it's an approach shot and it's not a very big movement. It's just a short little hop. And with every movement, there's kind of like a relevant balance move where you kind of kick this leg or you bring the leg up. But on this one, you should kick the leg to the side fence. And come in. So, it can be a runaround, it can be a backhand, it can be a forehand. But, see, Roger Federer really made that one famous, coming into the net. And it's really the fastest way to get into the net. But you can hit a front foot hop on the baseline and not come in. It doesn't have to be an approach shot. So,
and what do you think one of the biggest errors on the front foot hop that you see?
I think people lose the angles in their legs. You know, they hop too much. And I think they swing a little bit too high. You know, they come up over the shoulder. If you watch all the pro players do the front foot hops, they really finish around about their hip. So they kind of skim the ground and just make a very small hop. I think the biggest error is people hop too high and their head flies up instead of just kind of skimming the ground. So it's really important not to try and hop too much. It's just a little hop. So the next one is like a step down. And this is kind of where you're stepping into more of a neutral stance. So this is what I call a neutral stance. So a step down is characterized by sort of like this weight goes from the back foot to the front foot, but you can see that her leg is inside this outside foot. And so it's a really good snapping of the hip. Now, you'll see Claudine here brings the leg through. That's a personal preference thing. Obviously, once you start bringing the leg through, you're probably more prone to errors, but you're going to get more power. So, but I do like that leg coming through and then that crossover recovery. Really trying to take time away from your opponent. Like if you've got a medicine ball and you wanted to throw it as far as you could over the net, you would do a step down because you just know that you're going to get more power stepping in. And it's a really good one to, it's not that common in the pro game because it came so fast, but I think just in, A grade, B grade, C grade, the more that you can step in, I think fundamentally, the more power and the more balance you're going to get because you're hitting up 2 feet. Okay, so really like this. I think it's a really good one to start off learning early, stepping in and feeling comfortable. Like a lot of people hit off the open stance here because it's the non-dominant foot. But I think once you get comfortable stepping in on your forehand, it's going to help you have that transitional move to go to that front foot hop. So I think hitting off the front foot, and I find with, really, really beginners, getting the step in is probably the best place to start, just getting the step in. But, keeping the angles in through the legs is really important and kind of finishing the swing before the leg comes through. I think that's a really important thing too. Like I say, finish the tumble turn before you push off the wall, really finishing the swing. So again, it's an attacking move because you're stepping down the court and, really trying to take time away from them. So a fundamental move that I think everyone should start off with. This one here actually is an interesting one because when I charted Djokovic on the return of the second serve against Federer in the final of the US Open one year, he did this 98% of the time on his return of serve, which is an amazing stat. And the reason you do it's not one of the easiest moves, but it's a very confident move, to hit off this. But, footwork's all about the stance. And if you don't get the stance correct, if you don't get it into this semi-open stance, you can't really do the transfer. But you can see it's a transfer because you go from your back foot to your front foot and this leg kicks back like this. Now, where you kick the leg is going to define the move. So if you kick the leg to the side fence or you kick the leg to the front fence, it's going to determine what contact move you do. If you notice this swing here, she's finished with her elbow level. Just a really aggressive shot, where you can hit with disguise because you can hold it, and Claudine could go either way at the last minute. So it's a really good shot to hit with disguise. A lot of players don't do it because the timing's quite difficult, but it's a really aggressive. And you notice that foot points in the direction of where you hit it, and this leg curls back. Okay, so I really like this as a fundamental movement. You probably wouldn't teach that to beginners, but it's something if you've got a really athletic kid, I think it's a really nice move. And some people really like it. Some people find it difficult, but I think it's kind of just up to you as coaches to experiment with that transfer. But it can be hit as a backhand move as well, but a really good move on the return, the serve especially. So you see, it's just a snapping of the hips. Like you noticed that there was just a little snap of the hips. I think talking about, some common problems is people jump way too much into this shot. It's very much a very, very compact movement. And I think the biggest thing that I take home from the pros is how compact they are when they play. There's not all this excess movement. It's like snapping the hips. It's not like a lot of jumping and the head's flying everywhere. So I think compact is a really good, word to think of. this, the last one of the attacking is more of the low spin. And you see the little, the smaller girls like a Henin or a Martina Hingis, who really want to get some extra oomph in their shots, will sort of come off the ground and sort of hit from this semi-open stance. But you notice how compact that is, but there is a spinning of the hip. So the head stays still and there's a spinning of the hip. And it's kind of like these cha-cha-cha steps to adjust into the semi-open stance. And you're hitting off more of a kind of like this loaded stance. You're sort of loading so you can hit it either direction at the last minute. In a little while, we'll see more of a defensive move where you're kind of hitting more off a moving stance. This is, again, you can hit with disguise on this one because you can kind of hold it and snap the hips through at the last minute. So, and I really try, Lachlan, I really try and use words that kind of describe what I want the player to feel. Like a low spin, so you got to spin the hips and not low. You got to transfer. So try and use words that really kind of make sense. So when I call it out, they're kind of already got an idea of what they want to do by the word. Like I wouldn't want to call it a Serena or a Roger or a Hingis because it doesn't tell you what to do, even though a lot of these moves are very signature moves for a lot of the top players.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
so
when we look at these 4 attacking moves, do you kind of focus on one more than the other based on the anthropometrics of the player? Like for an Ivo Karlovic, you might not, he's 6'10" or 11. That might differ to someone if you were working with like a Diego Schwartzman, for example.
Yes, exactly. That's a great point. Like a Schwartzman's so much more athletic.
Yes.
So, something like Schwartzman's going to become a lot more elevated, and where he hits, more of an elevated move, some of the taller guys might find they just are better when they keep their feet on the ground. So, even these 12 moves, you don't have to do all of them. You've got them. You've got some really athletic kids that it happens naturally. If I was working with a 65-year-old, veteran player, I would probably do the move that I'm going to show you next. You'd probably just pivot those feet. You wouldn't come off the ground because, maybe athletically they're not athletic enough to do it, or it flies on them. They don't feel comfortable. So it's kind of like choreographing. It's sort of working with what feels comfortable for them. I've had some clients, I might only teach them 5 or 6 moves. Other clients, they're so athletic, I'll get through, a bunch of different moves. But, and see this one off the open stance on the backhand. I mean, that's a tough shot. You hit the open stance off the backhand too. So, some people will find that really natural. Some will really struggle with the open stance backhand.
And when you look at Djokovic, he hits a lot of open stance balls off the backhand compared to a player like Murray, who usually closes his stance.
Yeah, so Murray might close off 70, 80% of the time. But it's funny, Serena, because I've done all that frequency study, that, like I said before, she actually hits an open backhand 83% of the time, which is a crazy amount. A lot of that can be a grip. They could be a little bit more dominant on that top hand. They could feel, I think Papa Williams just said, Serena, that looks fantastic. Keep doing it. So it's quite interesting when you see a lot of the players that are coached by their parents, like Rafa with his unusual buggy whip swing. They say, you know what, that looks good to me. Keep doing it. So again, it's what feels natural to you. But that's the 4th sort of but you notice how compact that is? It's just very compact.
Yeah.
So rally footwork is kind of more, I would say, if you're hitting against a wall. So say you were hitting against a wall, you wouldn't do a front foot hop or a transfer against the wall. So it would come so fast back at you. So to me, and this is the bread and butter really of tennis. This is the building part of the game where you're just trying to build the point to get that opportunity. Because to me, those attacking moves are kind of more like take control, hurt, finish. That's how you've got to think. This is more build the point, get them running, attack the backhand. So these sort of moves are just trying to get that opportunity ball by getting them off balance. So these are, from my research, these are the ones that you see used the most, just because the players aren't trying to finish the point too quickly. They're just trying to build the point with a lot of these moves. So, and a lot of them, Lachlan, a lot of them you'll see is, this one, for instance, is so common in the women's game. Like you can just see Kerber doing that. You can just see Waransky doing that. You can see Serena doing that. because the ball comes a lot quicker in the women's game and harder through the middle. So they just want to keep that kind of 2-foot pivot where she's just, you know, the ball's coming too quick. So if you did a 2-foot pivot against a wall, you'd be able to keep that going for ages. As soon as you step in, you're trying to be more, aggressive. But I really like this when the ball comes quickly at you and you just keep it really, really simple. You see she just shifts out of the way. I love this shot for hitting straight through the middle. You know, a lot of people talk hit cross court, hit down the line, hit cross court, but this is a really good move to hit hard through the middle and take away their angles.
And what really stands out to me is how she has dropped that non-dominant leg, the important use. So if she kept that, if she didn't bend that non-dominant leg, she'd probably miss, like, it wouldn't go where she would want it to go.
Yeah, so that's that balance move we were talking about. You know, we've seen, curl the leg back, kick the leg to the side fence, drop the inside knee. So every contact move has its own relevant balance move. And that's, how you use that non-dominant leg. And it really defines every move. You'll see in a minute where you kick the leg is, and when I was doing all that frequency study, I just have a look where the leg kicks or where the foot's turning, and that would really tell me which one is used. So, so the women use this one a lot, very simple, but the men use this one a lot. So this is one thing that the men do, and this is especially Djokovic. Like, he will just step back off that back leg. You'll see Nadal as well, and they'll just rip off that one leg and just move the ball around the court with big margins, get the person running. Sometimes they'll do it on purpose. They could pull the trigger really early and win the point, but they want to exhaust you. They want to not miss and make you run 5 or 6 times side to side. And this is one of those moves that you can get back. That's why I call it a 1-foot pivot, because you're just pivoting on that foot, bringing that knee up for balance. And it's interesting, when you pull this leg around, it goes more cross court. If you keep that knee up like that, it's probably more down the line. So even how you manipulate that front knee is going to see where you direct it. So the knee up, you go down the line, pull the leg around, or pull it cross court. So just knowing how to manipulate that balance move like this leg will make a big difference, how you move the ball around the court.
So there's a link between, so I was going to say there's a link between the balance move or the contact move and the tactical interplay, if you'd like.
Yes. So, the balance move is, you lift that knee up, you're going to hit with more spin. You drop the knee down, you're going to hit it a bit flatter. So understanding, and I think that 1-foot pivot that we just saw is a really nice way to introduce topspin, because you want to learn that actually you hit the legs, like tennis is a lower body sport, and you hit the topspin with your hips, you hit the topspin with your leg. And, the racket is just the steering wheel. So we all think about, drop the racket, head, elbow up, but really you've got to match that with the lower body. And that's a big thing that I talk about, matching the upper body to the lower body, because that's where the balance comes. If you mismatch, if you don't get the swing line matching the lower body, you fall off balance, and that's why you make a lot of errors. So this one here is the most common forehand in the men's game, okay? It's a little bit of a different one. Here it's hit more as an angle, but this popping off the outside leg just to hit that heavy cross court with a lot of spin is the most common for my studies, forehand in the game. You see Dominic Thiem will hit that all the time. Djokovic, just to hit that further one cross court. But you notice we're talking about the 5 R's here, where she crosses out, she hops, and then she crosses back. So there's the out steps, there's the contact move, there's the recovery step. And that's the most common forehand. This is by far the most common backhand in the men's game, which is the closed backhand, where, because you can imagine, see Claudine's hitting this over in the corner. Most people are trying to hit the ball into the corner. So you're going to hit a lot of closed backhands when you play. And, you watch her here, it's closed because she's closing off the stance. That's why it's a closed backhand. Whereas the step down, this leg was more neutral and it was in here. You see this is a semi-closed stance, and very common on the one-hand backhand. You're always going to close off that stance. But I like this stance because off this stance, you can hit a slice, you can hit an angle, you can hit it cross-court hard, or you could even hit it down the line if it was about your chest and kick your leg back. So this is a backhand that you can hit with a bit of variety. You know, you can slice it, you can hit the angle, you can hit a hard cross court. If she was hitting it about her chest, she'd kick her leg back and what I call a high close, and she'd go down the line. But really, I think a lot of coaches don't practice that footwork enough. I think it's because it's the most common shot because most people are going to hit to your backhand. I think that closed backhand is one that you should really, really focus on a lot and just practice with that little different variety with the slice, with the angle, and, you know, even down the line if it's at your chest. Okay, so that's kind of more like the rally footwork. And you can see, you can even, once you learn them individually, you could start to put the attacking moves together. You could start to put the rally moves together. You could start to put the attacking, the defensive moves together, which we're going to look at now. And then you could even start calling out all the different names. So you could call out, you know, mogul, call out, and start to call them out. And eventually you don't say anything. They're just reading the feed. So let's have a look at the defensive footwork. Just let me know if I'm going over time. So this is more sort of footwork out in the corners. Okay, so you hit more, and to me defensive is when you push wide or you push back off the baseline. So we're going to look at the mogul, and you see it's very simple. There's a really fast crossing overstep to get out to the ball because you don't have time to go cha-cha-cha and take all these little steps. You need to get out there in one or two big steps. And she hits it more off a moving stance, right? So she's sort of skimming the ground, off the open. Having that toe is really important, that toe's pointing to the side fence. And, you know, you can do a double cross. The freaks of the world, like the Nadals and the, you know, Hewitts, would do a triple cross and not even hit it on the dead run. Because you can see, I'm going to show you a power move in a minute, but this helps you recover very quick if you can get out to this ball and recover very quickly off that stance.
So we see the mogul step and the lateral hop. Obviously, one's defensive, the other one's more neutral. When would you use one compared to the other, and what kind of shot?
Yeah, so I think the mogul's much lower, and it's much wider, it's much faster, and it's much deeper. So the lateral hop is a little bit higher. A lot of these moves depend on how fast the ball's coming. So if you've got a bit of time and you can load that foot and get behind it, you can hit that lateral hop. And your intention probably with the lateral hop is to hit a sharp angle or to hit a heavy cross court, where the mogul's probably because you're just trying to neutralize it. I really like you to hit that probably deep through the center, you know, depending where the player's, you know, standing. But if the player's standing maybe in the corner, you might hit it down the line. But a lot of the time, if you're hitting moguls, you're kind of on the defense. So the player's probably in the middle of the court. So you just want to go, the best defense is to push them back, honestly. So if you can hit this mogul deep back through the middle and get them moving back, to me, that's the best defense. So I just go back because this is a new one. This is called a power move. And this is kind of like where you're hitting on the dead run. Okay, so now she's running to the ball. And because she hits it like this, she's got to take an extra step past the ball. But really good to see that little bounce step that she hit there. Sometimes you can't get to the mogul, but sometimes the big thing, people like the power move too much, like Sampras. He'd love to hit that big one on the run and just go for it. Like you're calling about like Karlovic. He'd probably go out and just hit a power move and just go for the winner down the line. But the real road runners, they'll hit that mogul that we just see and just try and get back and try and avoid hitting the power move if they can. But it certainly needs to be practiced because this is certainly huge on the return of serve. You see her here? Like that could be a return of serve out wide. Like Karlovic is hitting a big slice out wide. That is by far the most common return of serve on the first serve return because you're going T or wide. So you use this move to cover a lot of distance quickly.
It feels like you can really cut the angle off a lot easier.
Yes. So you can really, you know, kick that leg. But you see that balance move there, Lachlan, like really kicking that leg to the side fence. And that's what defines the power move is, you know, really kicking this leg back to the. So I would always, that is so key to do that because if you're kicking it to the back fence, your hips will open up and you dump it in the net. So that balance move, that kick to the side fence is so crucial to make this move work because it will give you the balance and it'll keep the swing line going forward through the shot. So understanding that kick is so important when hitting on the run. Okay, so I'm just going to show you. So that's 10 different moves. This is an interesting one because when I looked at Rafa on the clay court, this was his most common move. So you imagine you saying the most common move that the greatest clay courter of all time hits is a back foot hop. But when he does it, he kind of does it like Yarker does. It's just a little tiny hop. And what that enables him to do is really brush up the back of the ball and not see this shot as a defensive shot. You merely want to see it as an opportunity to hit the ball heavy. So, you know, you move back and you hop off this back leg. It's actually a really nice way for you to get a lot of shape on the ball. To me, you know, a lot of the time that heavy ball off the back foot is going to give you the short ball more than that step down because you're getting it out of their strike zone. So just to the viewers, in my opinion, there's only two things you want to do in tennis. You either want to take time away from the opponent or you want to hit out of your strike zone. And this is one way to hit out of the strike zone. And that's what Rafa does. He's trying to constantly hit out of your strike zone with his slice and with his, you know, his heavy ball, his 1 foot pivots, his lateral hops. So I would never see this as a bad thing. A lot of people don't like it because they hit short. But, you know, if you really practice it, I think it can be a really, you know, aggressive shot.
I think one mistake that coaches out there make is they say that all your body weight is going backwards and not forwards. And that might be from a lack of repetition from what that player has been getting.
Well, I mean, Lachlan, I think the same when you hit a kick serve, right? I mean, you say, well, you don't really throw the ball out in front when you hit a kick serve. You know, you sort of throwing it behind you so you can brush up the back of the ball. If you throw your toss too far out in front, well, you can't hit topspin. So this is enabling you to hit topspin. And sometimes, you know, you can't be naive and think that you're never going to get this ball. You know, sometimes you're going to get pushed back in the corner and you're just going to have to hit this shot. So it's better to practice it. You mightn't be, you know, you might try and take the ball on the rise or whatever, but that's a high risk. Whereas going back, if you hit this short all the time, maybe you take it on the rise. But you might be surprised. A lot of people hit this really well. I mean, I always teach it because I think it's important. But you notice, again, it's not a huge hop. Again, it's just really compact. And the last one, which is quite an unusual one, but, you know, most people have never seen this shot before, but I love it. You see how she's turned her foot. It's called a reverse spin. And her foot is turned to the side fence and her leg is kicked to the front fence. Again, this enables her to hit with a lot of shape. And you'll see the men do this a lot. They move back and they brush up the back of the ball. This foot turns to the side fence and they hit what I call a reverse spin. Now, you don't have to hit that. You could go back and kind of like just pivot on 2 feet or hit that off 1 foot if this doesn't work for you. So I'm not saying that everyone has to hit this move, but you may as well go out and try it. You know, go out, give it a go. Kick the foot, turn the foot to the side fence, finish with the elbow nice and high. Have you ever tried that one, Lachlan? Have you ever given that one a go, the reverse spin?
I've done it as a player, teaching it. I haven't taught it specifically. Yeah. I usually stick to the pivots just because the players that I coach are more lower level and more amateur. Yeah. But no, I've never taught it, but I have done it as a player, and that is, it's not easy, but I like using my off forehand a lot, so I do that on the backhand side.
Well, it's funny because see this movement here, the greatest forehand probably in history, the hardest hit forehand in history, as a runaround forehand was Gonzalez.
Yes.
And he used to actually hit a reverse spin up inside the court. So it was interesting that, you know, he would hit this reverse spin actually inside the baseline, but he'd flatten it out instead of hitting this, you know. But, you know, again, like you say, if you've got a really talented kid and they do this naturally, you might just feed this and someone does it naturally and you say, you know what, just keep doing that because that works for you. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of these depend on, I mean, these are pro players doing it, but it's kind of fun. I know that you would have gone out and tried all the moves, and it's kind of fun going out there and trying them and seeing what works for you. So, you know, that's pretty much, you know, the 12 moves there that I like to teach out of many different ones. But, you know, I just want people to sort of look at, you know, even if just today, we suddenly looking at the lower body. looking at the lower body and having that biased eye instead of looking at the swing all the time.
Yeah, it's so insightful, because I think as coaches, coaches generally look at the grip or the swing line or everything from the hips up, but it's so important to use the lower body. Now, if you did a boxing class or a martial arts class, so much is from the lower body.
Yes.
But what about tennis? Can you link those two sports sort of together?
Well, you can, and I always think that tennis is a lower body sport. And so once you understand how to use the hips and get the feet in position, Nick Bollettieri would always say, if you can't reach the ball, you can't hit it. So, you've got to get into position with your feet. You've got to know what stance suits what move. And then, try and match, like I said, the upper body to the lower body.
Yeah.
So, I did mention to you before, like I have, with the COVID, I did a whole bunch of shadow tennis lessons that people can go on to, Bailey Tennis Footwork.com or Bailey Tennis Footwork on YouTube. And I've got these 12 lessons where you can just keep on shadowing all these moves that I showed you. So, like I said, I'm a big fan of shadow tennis. And, I'm just going to show you some basic ones here, but there's these 12 lessons that you do. But I've just tried to do it in front of a garage so people know they can do it outside. But I turn my back, so I feel like, when you're shadowing, it's much easier if you're behind someone than trying to shadow someone looking at them. So I kind of turn my back and I go through 12 different lessons. Here's just the low basic pivots, like it's very, very simple. Every lesson gets a little bit more complex. So once the people start to find, this is a little bit too more athletic for me, then like you said with your clients, you might only do lesson 1 to 4. And you find, okay, the next one doesn't kind of suit, it's a little bit more complex. But, a pro play would work all the way through all the 12 lessons. So it's just something that I wanted to do, like people are locked up. I know, back in, you're from Melbourne and back home, there's a lot of people locked down back there, looking to do some things sort of at home. So I just put that together, I can send you a link, or we can send a link to that so people can have a look at it, because I just kind of wanted to let people know that there's some really good shadow tennis routines out there. And, you can have a look at the swing lines and kind of get a feel for that. So,
yeah.
I'll stop share that now.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the last question, in terms of grips and swing line, if I get a racket, just real quick.
Yeah.
So with a semi-western grip, having an outside swing line, so when the racket goes to the side, or an inside swing line, how does having different grips need to be synchronous or to match that swing line?
Well, you're exactly right. So some grips are going to definitely suit some swing lines. So and so I think it's really important to actually know that, because with the Western grips, that transfer that we said, which was more hit at your chest level, they're going to find that's much more comfortable than, say, an Eastern grip. And when you're stepping in and doing that one that I just showed you, then where you step in with the Eastern grip, it's going to be a lot more comfortable as well. So, there's definitely, like we talked about with Serena, her backhand grip is going to suit a lot more if she's a bit more top hand dominant than bottom hand dominant. So that's also going to be a big reason why people kind of like certain moves, because it suits their grip. But I still feel that, you should be able to do all those moves with all grips, but you just have to modify a little bit. A lot of it might be how you position yourself from a strike zone point of view. So if you've got more of a Western grip, you're going to have to move up to and hit a bit higher than, say, an Eastern grip. So I think, matching also to the strike zone is really important on the grips, and also knowing which ones feel comfortable to you. But, like I said, like we talked about the martial arts, it's really, really important to match the upper body to the lower body. And if you can be aware of that, I think that's going to really, really help. The other thing that I think is really important, just the last thing, is that, there was some where you landed and there's some where you got your feet on the ground. I always feel like when you do a pivot, you should finish the swing and then look. If you're doing a move where you're going elevated, like a pop, you land and then you look. And if you can do that, you can actually cut down your errors by about 10%, because people look way too early, at where they want to hit the ball. So you know, if you land and look, or you swing then look, that's a really good tip to cut a lot of errors down as well.
And we see Federer, who, if you watch him on slow motion, that he has his head still. It's like a pole's going through his head all the way down. And he's just so still, and then he looks at it and his body is so much more balanced.
Yes. And I think if everyone's got a trigger, you know what, a trigger, like one thing that can actually help them understand it. If you can go swing, finish the swing and then look, or you can land and then look, that gives you a good timing thing to understand, you know, that contact point. And because, you know, we talk about footwork, we talk about swing lines, we talk about stances, all that thing, but really the number one is balance. Yeah. And if you said to me, out of those 5 R's, which are the most important, I'd say reading is so important. That's why I try to do footwork where you're actually hitting tennis balls, because you can do all the shadow, you can do all the ladder drills, but it's the reading that's so important in tennis.
It's all about really perception.
Yeah, it's so important.
Now, Dave, for coaches out there, I know some coaches all around the world, really, how do they reach out to you? How do they learn more about what you do? What kind of services do you provide to coaches?
So I have an online certification course. So I've certified some coaches in my method. You know, a lot of them just want to have a much more in their coaching, to have more specificity to their coaching, or start talking about footwork, because a lot of the coaches the students don't hear about footwork a lot. So so coaches can definitely get licensed online. I have a DVD. That part of what I showed you is a DVD and a manual that you can buy, which shows you those 12 fundamental moves with books and progressive photos. A lot of my stuff, I really make a big effort on my Instagram to go through and show a lot of the drills on Instagram and my Facebook. So that's all free. I have blogs that I talk about. So there's a couple of different options, but even if there's any students listening, I also do online consultation on the footwork as well. And I do a lot of visits to clubs. So I go to clubs and I'll go there for a week or go there for a weekend and do a whole footwork clinic. So that's all on my website, which is BaileyTennisFootwork.com.
Yeah, and what about your contact information?
Yeah, so they can contact me on david@BaileyTennisFootwork.com. So just david@BaileyTennisFootwork.com, because I also have fly-in clinics. I have people fly in. I've had about 70 people fly in over the last couple of years, because I feel like when you come and do footwork, if you can do it intensively over, say, 4 days, you can get on a really good roll with it. So I really feel like sometimes footwork too, even for the coaches, it's good to have a real block of footwork and, you know, work through it. But I think the other thing for the coaches is, if you've got those 12 fundamental moves, there's a whole bunch of lesson plans right there. There's a whole kind of bunch of themes that you can, okay, we're going to do the front foot hop this week. We're going to do the transfer the next week. So it also gives you a lot of structure, I think, to your lessons. So that's what's great about it as well.
Dave, thanks so much for all that information. I know you're very generous on your Instagram and Facebook feeds. I'd highly recommend any coach out there who hasn't seen this or would like to get into more of it. It's definitely helped me, and I'm sure it's helped other coaches. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and going through all of your methods.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. It's been great to meet you.
You too.
Bye, everyone.